Yes, I do. Let me just...
It's car.
It's car. It's car. No. Welcome to a new video. I'm trying out some art supplies I've never really used before, which is pretty exciting. Paul Rubens have been kind enough to let me try out their 48 colour set of oil pastels as well as their oil pastel paper. This is an art supply that's always been a little intimidating to me just because of how different it is to the usual things I use, but I was honestly pretty excited to start using them. I had a bunch of ideas floating through my head because they just seem like quite a fun medium. So today I wanted this to be quite a chill video, just figuring out how to use them a little bit and not do anything too complicated as a beginner, and just figure out how I like to use them. So the set comes with a few things: a small guide showing the colours in each set they sell and a little information on the product itself, as well as a swatch sheet, which we love to see. I know a lot of people don't always like filling these out, but they're honestly so helpful, and filling one out for 48 colours shouldn't be anywhere near as bad as some of my previous ones I've done. The first reveal is so satisfying though. Seeing the colours for the first time and how good they look together just pleases me to no end. But since I've barely had any experience with these, I was a little confused by the condition of a couple of them. One or two of the colours looked really oily, and I don't know if this is what oil pastels are just like. It is in the name, but I thought I'd mention it anyway. It didn't seem to affect how they worked, so I don't think it's an issue, but you can see on a couple of them they're just like a little wet. There's also a little information on each pastel's wrapper. It just says like the name of them and some other things. But yeah, now it's swatching time. You can see they go down really smoothly and they are so vibrant, which is nice. This is another one of the ones that was super oily, like I said. It really soaked into the wrapper and you can see how much it's on my fingers, like they are so shiny from how oily it is. So yeah, they're really interesting to use. They're very soft and creamy and they can lay down quite thick sometimes and leave like a really nice chunky texture. Some of them seemed softer than others, like leaving more behind easily, where some of them seemed a little more resistant. Like this seemed the case with 217 purple, 237 blue and 086 green mostly. You can kind of see it on the swatch sheet. So after doing the swatching, I thought the next logical step would be to do some, it's not swatching, but some testing, just to see how well these blend and how they lay down. And because again, I've never used these before, it would just be a great way to get a feel for the art supply before I put the pressure of having to have something look good. So I start by picking out a bunch of colours that I think would potentially look nice together and just creating sort of gradient blend between them. We've got light blue to dark blue, yellow to green, pink to sort of reddish, and then some more blues, and they blend really nicely. I used my finger. I read you can use like Q-tips and just there are other blending materials out there. Using my finger worked just fine. I was using them in a circular motion, which seemed to get a really good result. And then I just wanted to see how well they would layer over each other. So here I just put down like a blank blue square and then go over it with a darker colour. In this case I think it's like a magenta purple red sort of thing, which lays down amazingly. I think because the blue is a lighter colour whereas the red is a dark colour. So then I thought it would be interesting to see if it works the opposite way around. So I lay down the square, the red square, and then I tried using the blue over it, but it just did not want to layer the same way it did the other one. I think because it's a light blue on a dark colour, it was just blending it and you were just getting this sort of purple in between with streaks of the blue, and it was really covering the end of the pastel itself. So like say next time I want to draw with it, it will not be the colour it's supposed to be. I will show you down here. Yeah, so this is just it rubbing back to blue. It creates quite a cute effect, and you can also see here you can get a fine tip almost from use because these are so soft. They are easy to shape if you've been scribbling, if that makes sense. I don't even know if that makes sense. But yeah, that's my test sheet. But here I wanted to see how it would work for shading, so I put a dark blue down and then I was going to use a purple to shade it, and it kind of works. It's hard to put down a thick layer of a colour on top of a colour that's already there. It just smushes it around a little bit, which is strange. I'm just not used to oil pastels, so I'm not sure how they're supposed to work, but it just kind of seems like it was just scratching out lines. I eventually do get it to sort of blend, which does look quite nice, but I'm just not used to doing these, so that's how it looks. Yep. Right, so you're gonna notice in this video that some parts are sped up and some aren't. Obviously the swatching part is, but later throughout the vid it's going to switch between real time and sped up, so when it looks like I'm suddenly doing things really fast, now you know why. Maybe I'm lying and I really am just that fast. You'll never know. I'm drawing some animal characters because I wanted to try some simple things that didn't get too complicated for me. Also, it's August and I'm getting really excited for autumn. So naturally Night in the Woods vibes are creeping back into my brain, and I think it was this time last year I created some animal characters for an October challenge that I never finished. So I wanted to do something with them for this video just because it is very, very heavy in my mind at the moment. I'm not going to show the original drawings for them, you'll have to wait for my next sketchbook tour, which will be soon. So when talking to the representative for Paul Rubens, they mentioned that oil pastels can also be used on watercolour paper, so I thought I would try these out on several paper types. We have the oil pastel paper that was sent to me, some watercolour paper I have, and then some good old regular cardstock just to see how that compares as well. So here I'm just finishing off the initial sketches. These were me planning out what I wanted to do with the oil pastels, so obviously I had to throw a little Cara in at the end, just because she is my girl. I also doodled out a little cowboy who was based on a ghost from my October challenge I mentioned earlier. I don't use him unfortunately, but you know, I wanted to because I'm still in a cowboy mood, and I thought it would be nice to have a cowboy in this video, but I just don't think he's suited to it. He's a bartender originally, and he just looks much better in that situation than this one, so I kind of just gave up on him. Right, so these are the papers that I'll be using, the watercolour, oil pastel and cardstock. I will label them on the screen, but we're starting off with my little crocodile here on the oil pastel paper, which also seems to be a slightly cream colour, at least compared to the cardstock. It also feels quite creamy and smooth to work on as well. Like I mentioned earlier, this character was made when I was in a Night in the Woods mood, so no surprise they are heavily inspired by Bee in appearance. And I also hadn't figured out a colour scheme for them, so I just went with the colours I'd always pictured them with, which are obviously the same as Bee. I couldn't picture them with a different colour scheme, and this one just fits them so well after it being how I imagined them the whole time. So a little bit about them. They are a little thief. In my original drawings of them, they're following a little cute fox character who is foraging for mushrooms and nuts and berries in the woods, and this little guy is planning to take everything they've foraged instead of doing the work themselves because they are sneaky, a little mean and incredibly lazy. You could argue that the time they take to follow the fox and wait for them to forage everything would be time they could have been gathering themselves, but they're a stubborn little guy who enjoys that someone else did all the hard work for them. He's very cute but very mean. So because their colour scheme is all blues and purples except for the pumpkin that is on his jumper, I thought going for an orange-red background would make a good contrast, especially since they're like complementary colours, I think. So because I don't know how oil pastels work, as you've noticed probably, I kind of am just using them to colour in all the area on this character, the same way I would any other material, like with acrylic pens or paints or just alcohol markers in general, which I'm not sure is the way to go, just because I think it is quite wasteful because it is laying down very thick, and this is why I had the concern of these aren't going to last very long. Even doing it that way, they lasted quite well, which I was very surprised about. But yeah, It's a very chunky picture, and you can see there are lots of little bits everywhere that I suppose I could go in and pick off, but my concern there is it is very easy to smudge, and I didn't want to risk going in, picking things off, and then just ruining the picture or blending colours into other colours. So yeah, this one is a very thick, chunky picture, which I do kind of like. It does give it this soft appearance, but yeah, I just don't think it's the best way to use these. So for the picture itself, as I said, I was figuring out the colour scheme as I went, mostly basing it on B. And it was at this point that I thought, because of how I'd coloured it, that perhaps it would be cute to have the sleeves as a different colour to the main body, just because it makes it a little bit more interesting. And I do, because I haven't planned it out again, I am just choosing the colours as I go, which is why they don't always work so well. Like the shading on the jumper doesn't really work out so well at first, just because it is too light a colour. It's not maybe not the best colour for shading, and I do a lot of tweaking throughout. Those colours will change later. I did try lining some parts of it, like the hands, and I think I lined the pumpkin again, just because I think, as cute as it would have been to keep it entirely lineless, some of it did need some definition, just because I'd gone for quite similar colours and tones and whatnot. So yeah, I added in some line art, and because of the nature of these, it's very chunky line art, and it's difficult to get it looking fine and neat. And part of me does regret it a little bit, just because it does look a bit messy, but I'm also not sure what else I could have done, because it needed the definition. On to the next one. Right, so this little birdie is on the watercolour paper. You can see it's very textured, lots of dips and bumps, so the pastels lay down very differently to when I was using the oil pastel paper. This is when it really felt like I was wasting the pastels, because they were getting like caught in the dips. It was like pulling off chunks almost. They were just getting stuck in the grooves of the page. So I decided blending it out, and boy do they go much further this way. I think they were made for blending. I really should have done some more research before using these, but I really thought it would be fun to go in almost blind. But I do believe the best way to use these are to blend them. They just go so much further, and you can get these nice gradients between the colours. So it just covers the paper a lot more effectively, and it covers a lot of the gaps I had previously missed and would have been really hard to cover going the way I had been going. So this character is a fan of the occult. Their whole deal is that they want to successfully perform a summoning ritual. They don't care what they summon, they just want to be able to say that they can and have done one. Now, they don't really mind what length they have to go to for this. They didn't even hesitate at the mention of death, as long as it's not theirs, their game. Knowing this about them, I really like that going for the blended look on this one makes them look a little creepy, especially in the eyes. It sort of looks like one of those spooky paintings you'd find in a haunted house, where maybe the eyes follow you. The blurredness of it, I just really like it. It gives it almost an ethereal, soft look. I'm not sure how to describe it. But I found this a lot using the pastels in general, not just on this paper. But when you try and layer a colour over a colour that's already there, it does seem to push the first colour around a lot, or pick it up, which can create some like streaky mess, and I'm not entirely sure how to go about this, like how to deal with that better. Like in the end I think it looks okay, but as I was doing it, it was getting quite frustrating, because it meant that colours either weren't going down or they were just removing the colours that were already there. Because I'd gone for the tones of blues on the first one, I thought it would be fun to maybe have this one be a bit more warm. So again, I figured out the colour scheme of this one as I was going. So it's more red tones, except for when I get to the sleeves. I thought it would be nice to have some contrast. Overall, I actually think this one might be my favourite of all the ones I do for this video. Again, I also just really love how the blurred look of it from blending it, perhaps too much, from blending it did to it, so I really like it. So this one is just using the regular old cardstock. Oh, also you can probably see the drawings. Well, you can see the drawings in the top right. How I did this, I actually drew them all first and then coloured them after, but I thought for the sake of the layout of the video it would be best to show them one at a time. I also realised by this point that I should stick down the page so it doesn't move every time I'm drawing on it. I'm annoyed I didn't think of that from the beginning, because that was annoying at the beginning, and then it got so much easier. But anyway, yes, this is cardstock with another character that I designed at the same time as the others. It is a sheep knight. I really liked the contradiction of something so soft being in a hard and tough metal armour suit and wielding a sword. You might have seen this character before, I can't remember, but I feel like I posted a gouache painting I did sometime last year. I went more cutesy and simple with this one, as like I said earlier, I wanted everything to be big, easy colour blocks. I was also excited to try out the textures here with the wool, so I was blending most of it, but then went back in after to add some swirls on the wool, which gave it a nice contrast with the smooth texture next to the thick blocky texture when you don't blend it out, so I was really happy with that. I was also quite excited to try out the armour, because sometimes I can get a grasp on how metals should look, so I was just excited to see if it would work here. I don't know if I like how it ended up, you'll see what I mean, but because of the nature of the oil pastels, it all kind of blended and became a bit muddy a couple times. I'm also just not the best with colours. But you can see on the cardstock here, I think this one is probably the worst offender. When blending and laying things down, it really just wanted to come off the page, which is why I got a load of streaky messes. I really think this one is definitely the worst for oil pastel. The watercolour paper was really good at holding it, probably because it is made to absorb materials, and also the grooves helped. And the oil pastel was maybe the best, probably because it wasn't textured. Like, you can get untextured watercolour, I think, but I don't have any to hand, so that's just what I went with. But yeah, I think because I was trying to add highlights with colours on top of dark colours, that's where the muddiness came from, like with the pink. On top of everything, I wanted it to be bright pink highlights, but that's not exactly how it works. Oh yeah, I wanted to do a background, but I wasn't sure what to do, so I added these sparkles and then decided that I wanted it to have a pink background, and me being me, I thought, oh, I can just draw around the sparkles, but that's not going to work because these can't really do that fine a detail. But I just give up and I colour over it all again. Which is fine because you can just go back in afterwards and add the sparkles, so that's what I end up doing. So after doing the other three, I had to do one for my girl Cara. She's on the oil pastel paper again, so I could compare it after using the watercolour paper and cardstock. Yeah, I have to say, I think the oil pastel paper does feel quite good. When blending on the cardstock, the pastels just kept wanting to lift and come off with my finger, and it just doesn't feel like it wants to do that so much here. The watercolour felt pretty good, but it was very textured. So this one's interesting. I think because I went in with the darker colour first, I thought it was lighter than it would be, but it just turned out very dark. I messed up her face just in general. I think because I'd gotten pretty into blending by this point and maybe developed a habit of overblending. But anyway, the colours were both too dark or maybe too similar, so adding the blush just kind of muddied the whole thing up again. I then also messed up with the eyes and the mouth and just made her look pretty scary. She just looked terrible. But Despite how easy these can be to mess up, they are also fairly easy to fix too in certain cases. Not with everything, just a few of them I found I could fix the mistakes. A little later I can cover it up and just start again and fix it, and I much prefer how it looks. So as you can see, well, you probably know by now, I don't typically like using black in my pictures unless I really have to, but for this one I was feeling like it was too messy and it needed a background colour that wasn't going to add to the jumble of colours that I already had going on. So I think it was the right choice to use black this time, and it made the colours that were already there pop so much more, and I just much preferred how it looked, as up to this point all I could see was like this kaleidoscope mess that I was just not happy with. So the pastels themselves are shaped to have a bullet head design. While I think this is useful when they're brand new, they're soft enough that they lose their shape pretty quickly, and I've learnt that oil pastels are not great for small details, especially when you're working on such a small canvas. I can see these being good for large pieces, and maybe I'll try that out one day, but for the size I'm working on in this video, big blocky shapes seem the way to go. And that's not to say that small details are impossible. You can kind of get finish details if you've worn the pastel down so that has a more sharper edge. So my overall thoughts of these is I enjoyed them so much more than I thought I would. There's something so fun about just layering these down on a page and going crazy with them. Just blending them with my fingers was fun. If a bit messy, these were very messy, and yeah, it just took me back to playing with paints and art supplies when I was younger, and how much fun it would be to just put so much colour down on a page and just make this absolute mess. They've definitely left me wanting to do more. I want to try doing some more realistic things too, just because I was so nervous for these. I went very simple and basic in what I could have done. So I could see fruits and flowers being fun to mess around with, and I want to try out some bigger pieces too. I'm not sure what of yet, and I don't know if I'd film it as I'm still learning how to use these. I think it would be fun to just do a chill thing for myself, but who knows, I'll probably share whatever I do on Instagram. I share everything over there with you guys, perhaps a bit too much. But yeah, let me know what you think of these. I'd be interested to know if you guys have used oil pastels before, and if you have, how do these look in comparison? A huge shout out to my patrons for continuously supporting me. Disbeer, Imagine Paulie, Megan Palmer, Grim Clow, Lily M, Bailey, Non-Toxic, Squiddy, Saint Nick's, LP, Parker, and Calcifer Sparks 4. Also, thank you to Paul Rubens for letting me try these out, and thank you to everyone who took the time to watch this video. We've been circling around to 10k for a while now, which is crazy, and I think I'm going to do a draw this in your style video with a giveaway to say thank you, so keep an eye out for that. Hopefully that will be soon. I say this every time, but I have quite a few videos planned that I still just need to either finish editing or get around to filming. I'm hoping to do a tips and advice video soon that some of you asked for on Instagram. But otherwise, I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in the next video.